friends, it's Christy. Welcome back to my channel and welcome to day 11 of my 2021 holiday card series. Today I'm going to be making a card using Avery Elle's Christmas Critters. So I've stamped my images out in Lawn Fawn jet black ink on Spectrum Noir Ultra Smooth Premium White cardstock. I'm also going to be using some pattern paper from the Die Cuts with a View Holly Jolly 6x6 pad. So I'm going to flip through and find the sheet that I wanted to use as my inspiration. I'm going to tear that out and tuck it under my cardstock panel so I can choose my Copic markers to match. So I'm going to start with this moose, and like I said, I'm using my Copic markers to color, and the shades that I chose for him are E23, E25, and E27. So I'm going to start with that E27 and do a little shadow on the top half of his ears because they would be cast in shadow by that large antlers. And then also a little bit under his little poof of hair. And I also wanted his nose to look like it was protruding out, so I put a very thin shadow right above that as well. And then I'm going to start blending that out with the E25. I'm just breaking him down into parts today since he's a larger image, so I just want to make sure that I get the nicest blend possible. So I'm going to do him in little sections. So then I'm going to take that E23 and I'm going to do little circular scribble motions to break up the edge of that E25 so everything blends really nicely and fill in the rest of his face. I did leave a little space at the bottom of his ears because I wanted that to be even lighter. Then I'm going to go back to the E27 and work on the lower half of his body. And this time I'm going to cast a shadow underneath his scarf, down the backs of his legs, and also on the top of his tail because I want the underside to be lighter as well. And also it's still under that big antler, so it would be cast in shadow. And then I'll blend that out with the E25 once again. That E27 is quite a dark marker, so it can leave a harsh line if you're not careful to really scrub over the edge of that and pull it into the next shade so that it's very nice and blended. So that's what I'm working on. And then I'll move down to the E23. I'm going to go a little bit further on that tail, leaving a little white space at the bottom, just like I did with the ears. And then I'm going to blend out almost all the way down. I'm going to leave a little bit of a lighter space for his belly, and I'll fill in all of his legs. And once I'm done with that, I'm going to add in the E21, and I'm going to use that to fill in the bottom part of the ears. And I will also do the little belly. And I also did the tail. I forgot to do that right away, but I will go back and do that as well. It did need a little bit of work to blend that belly into a straighter line, so I went back to that E23 real quick. And then for the little poof, I decided to make that just like a shade lighter. So I started with the E23 and then filled that in with the E21. And then to that combo, I'm going to add in the E000, and I'm going to use this to color in his muzzle. So I'm doing a very thin shadow on the outer edge with that E23, and then blending over that with the E21, just catching the edge of it, not blending over the whole thing. And then from there, I will use the E000 and again use that little circular motion to get everything nice and smooth. The E000 has so much colorless blender in it that it just pushed the E21 out of the way. So I did go back and do a second layer of that to blend it in nicely. And there I went back and did the tail with the E21. For his antlers, I'm going to use E50, E51, and E53. So I'm going to use the E53 first to cast a shadow down at the bottom edge, and then also to add a little shadow to each of the little prongs. And then I'm going to blend up with the E51, and then I'll fill in the rest of that white space with the E50. And again, because this is a larger image, I'm just going to do one antler at a time. Then I'll switch over to the other side, and I'm going to do the same thing just on the opposite side. Since he's pretty much facing forward, I went ahead and did a central light source. So I'm going to just do the same thing, adding that E53 and then blending out with the E51, and then using the E50 to fill in and just carefully coloring around all of those little light bulbs so I don't get any color in those. And then I'll use those 3 shades to color in the little reindeer's face. So I'm going to trace the outside edges of that section of him and do a little bit below his collar as well with that E53. And then I'm blending toward the center with that E51. And then I will fill in the rest of him with the E50, just his face. I accidentally grabbed the E53 there, but luckily I didn't put too much down. And then I just made sure to blend over that really well with the E50. And I felt like that was just a little bit too washed out for me, so I did go back in with a second layer. That's something I like to do a lot of times. It just beefs up that saturation and really makes your blend a lot more smooth. So I just laid same exact colors right over top of where I had already put them down. For the rest of my reindeer, I'm going to use E53, E55, and E57. And I'm going to start with that E57 and do my shadows. Once again, I'm going to break this image up into 2 parts since these are a little bit larger than, say, like Lawn Fawn images or, smaller images that I typically color. So I'm blending out with the E55 and making sure to really scrub over that E57 again to get that broken up. And then I'm going to blend out the ears completely with the E55. And then I'm going to bring in E53 for my highlight. So if I were to color this image again, I probably would not use this combo. My E53 and E55 do not get along often. Sometimes if it's a little bit of a smaller image, I can get away with it, but this time I did not, and they just don't like to blend together. So I had to work back over that a couple of times to get a nice smooth blend, but I'm still not really happy with how he turned out. So I probably would color them both the same, the moose and the reindeer, if I were to do it again, but it's all fine. It's still, a relatively decent combo. I don't know why those 2 colors don't like to blend together because they look so nice when they do work, which makes me keep reaching for them over and over again. But yeah, that E53 and the E55 just push that E57 too much out of the way. And the more layers that you build up, for whatever reason, the more sticky the ink gets with these ones. I've tried replacing the nibs and I've tried refilling the markers and it doesn't seem to help. So I don't know if there's an issue inside the barrel of the marker. Maybe there's some buildup inside. Maybe I just need to replace my E53 or my E55. But anyway, I did add about 3 layers of that ink to try to get a semi-decent blend. And then for the antlers, I'm going to use E44, E47, and E49. So I'm coloring them very similar to how I did the moose's antlers. I used that E49 down at the bottom and then added a little shadow on the inner edge of each of the little sections. And then I blended out with the E47, and then I'm going to fill in the rest with the E44. And I really like the way this combo turned out. I think this one is a really good combo, and it has that dull shade to it because it's more desaturated, so I think it really works for something like antlers or also hooves. I'm going to use the same shades for the hooves on both the reindeer and the moose and the reindeer's nose. If I had thought for a minute, I probably could have given him a red nose and made him Rudolph, but I don't know. I was so distracted by that blend that I just kind of went in with the darker colors, and it's fine. He can just be a regular reindeer. I can do Rudolph on another card. So I just colored the hooves with the darkest on the outer edge and then blended toward the opposite side with the lighter shades. And then for the bunny, I'm going to use E40, E41, and E42. Starting with the E42 and doing a little shadow on the top side of his ears so the underside can be pink. And then a little shadow on the top of his head and around those little earmuffs. And then down the sides of his face and body. And then I blended that out with the E41. And then I came in with that E40, and I'm going to leave like a little circular shape around his nose and mouth, and also a little circular shape on his belly, and those will be left white. So I'm going to move on to some greens, and I'm going to use G94 and G99 to color the base of each of those little light bulbs, the little connector part. So started with the G99 and then blended out with the G94, just using those two shades because it's such a small little area there. I mean, you could even use one if you want to, but I always like to have some contrast. And then I'm going to add in the G43, and I'm going to use these shades to color in the wreath around the reindeer's neck. I'm going to start with the G99. I accidentally grabbed the G94 and started with that one because the cap is darker, so I got confused for a second. But I quickly grabbed the G99 and continued on with that. And I'm just doing a shadow underneath the bow and also on the inner edge of that wreath, so it'll be lightest on the outside. So I'm just kind of carefully coloring around because that is a very dark color, so I don't want to get any of that into the bow or the berries or any other little parts there. So just blending out carefully, and then I'm going to come in with the G94 and take that out even further. And I'm doing a little circular motions. I want to try to leave a little bit of texture in here. So I'll come back and add a little bit of detail actually too to give it even more texture, but I'm just going to blend that out a bit. And then once I'm happy with that, I'll grab the G43. This one is quite a bit lighter, so it's really going to brighten things up. But I didn't want to go too bright because the green in that pattern paper is fairly dull. So I didn't want to bring in anything that was like a yellow toned green. I wanted these desaturated colors, but you know, I still wanted a really nice highlight. So I needed to have enough of a contrast of colors there. So I'm going to come back in with the G99 and do some dot detail in there just to add that texture like I said. And I'll do the same with the G94. If I had wanted these dots to really stand out, I would have let the wreath dry first, but I wanted them to get kind of hazy and blend in, so that's why I went ahead and did that right away. And then I'm moving on to my red combo. I'm using R22, R24, and R27. I don't reach for that R27 very often. I normally prefer the R29, but the R29 is a little bit more of a cool toned red, and the R27 is a little bit more of a warm red. It's kind of like an orangey red, and the red in that pattern paper is definitely a warmer red, so that's why I chose that R27. And I just did every other stripe on the scarf, blended out with the R24, and finished with the R22. Then I'm going to color in the bow on the wreath with these shades as well, keeping my darkest color where that fabric would be gathered into the knot and the inner parts of that bow, and a little shadow on the ends, and then blending out with that R24. I'm putting a highlight on the outer edges of that bow and the tips of the little ends with the R22. And then I'm going to take just the R27 and color in the little berries that are on the wreath. I'm just going to do one shade for them because they're super small. I also wanted some of the bulbs on the string of lights to be red, so I'm going to do every fourth one. So I'm just counting out 3 in between and then doing the next one red. And I put the R27 down toward the bottom and the R24 in the middle, then the R22 at the top where the light would be hitting it the most, although I guess they're kind of lit from within as well. And then I'm going to add in a pink combo. I'm using R000, R11, and R20. I'm going to do some rosy cheeks on all of my critters with the R20. And then I will also do the reindeer's ears and the bunny's ears with that R20, add a touch of that. Then I'm blending out the cheeks with the R11 and also the inner part of the bunny's ears. And then because the bunny is a lot lighter, I wanted to lighten up her cheeks even more, so I went around those with the R000 and also added that to the inside of the ears. And then I wanted to add some pink light bulbs, so I'm doing the one that is in between the 2 white ones. So it's going to be red, white, pink, white, red, white, pink, white. So I thought it would just be fun to have like a candy cane string of lights. And I'm also going to do the collar on the reindeer in this pink combo and the earmuffs on the bunny. And for the earmuffs, I'm being a little more heavy-handed with that R20 because I wanted them to be a bit darker so they would show up and not be the same color as her cheeks and ears. And then for the white light bulbs, I'm going to go back to my E40 and E41. So the E41 will be my darkest, and then I'll blend in the middle with the E40 and just leave the plain white cardstock for the highlight. And then I'll do the same thing for the white stripes on the moose's scarf, just letting a little bit of that white cardstock show through so that it really looks white, but it has that shading to it. And I'll do the little tag on the reindeer's collar with those shades, and then trim these images out with their matching dies. So I'm going to go back to my Holly Jolly 6x6 pattern paper pack from Die Cuts with a View, and I'm going to choose a few more prints that are going to go along with that inspiration print that I use for my coloring. So I chose the snowflakes on the dark green background, and then I was going back and forth between the red plaid and the white with the gold foil polka dots. And I think either option would be pretty, but I decided to go with the red. So these are the pattern papers that I'm going to be using. I think they look really beautiful together. So next I want to work on my sentiment, and I'm going to just take that scrap piece of cardstock and stamp out Be Merry from this set with Lawn Fawn lobster ink. I stamped that down twice to make sure I had a nice bold impression. And then I'm going to pop my card base in my MISTI. I'm using Lawn Fawn Ballet Slippers cardstock. And I'm going to use that red ink again on the inside. I'm going to stamp the image with the penguins and the Christmas tree and another sweet little sentiment. So I've die cut my pattern papers with some Lawn Fawn dies. I use the large stitch rectangle stackables, and then for the curve I use the simple stitch hillside borders. So I'm going to glue this really elegant floral that was our inspiration for the coloring down at the bottom of the card. I was just opening that up to make sure it was indeed the bottom of the card. And then I'm going to take the red plaid and adhere that to the top of the card. So that will be overlapping and just allowing a little bit of that really pretty pattern to peek through at the bottom. Then I die cut the green pattern with the large cross-stitched square stackables, And rather than doing a white snow border, I decided to use another pattern from that paper pad. It has a little bit of a print to it. It also has a little more foiling in it. So I just thought that would be something a little bit fun and different. I'm going to glue the green snowflake print to another white piece of cardstock just to give it a bit more stability, because I want to pop that up on my card. And then I'll add the snowdrift that was also cut with one of the simple stitch hillside borders. So I've added my foam tape. I'm going to peel off those release papers and then line that up in the top part of my card, just trying to make sure that that is centered as much as possible. Using the lines that's on that plaid to make sure it's on there nice and straight, and then I can bring in my images. I typically like to start with my largest image first, and that is definitely the moose. So I'm going to add some liquid glue to the back of him, and then he's going to go over on the left-hand side of that square. I'm going to let just the end of the string of lights overhang the edge of the focal panel, just to kind of make that scene look a little bit more expansive. And then I'll do the same on the other side with the reindeer's antler, and then the other antler is going to go in front of the moose. I die cut the sentiment with one of the everyday sentiment banners from Lawn Fawn. I'm going to adhere that up at the top. If I could, I would have adjusted the moose and slid him down a little bit so that the sentiment didn't have to overlap him, but that glue is already dry. It dries super fast, so it's totally fine. I think it still looks cute. And then I added the bunny in the center between those two guys. To finish off the card, I wanted to add a couple of sequins. I have 2 sparkling clear sequins and 1 gold. And I have a large, medium, and small going down in descending order. So I'm going to glue those down, and then I'm going to add a little bit of Stardust stickles to each of the light bulbs on the moose's antlers. So I'm just adding it in the lightest part of that so it'll look lit up. I'm also going to add some to the bunny's ear mufflers, and then to the collar on the reindeer, the little tag part. And I added some to the bow on the wreath as well. And after the sequins have had a few seconds to dry, I also wanted to fill in the centers. So I use Christmas red in the center of the sparkling clear sequins, and I'll go back to my Stardust stickles for the center of the gold sequin. And that is going to complete my card for today. So I'm going to lift that up to the camera so you can see all of that detail and those adorable critters. And then I will give you another peek at the inside. So I hope you guys enjoyed this one. If you did, please be sure to hit that like button. It lets me know that I'm doing a good job. Also make sure that you're subscribed and that you've rung that notification bell so you don't miss any future videos. I post new ones every Monday and Friday. If you're interested in picking up any of these products for yourself, I'll have them listed and linked in the description bar below. And if you'd like to keep watching, here is day 11 of the previous 2 years of holiday card series. You can click on either one to check them out. Thank you guys so much for watching. I hope you have an absolutely amazing day. Bye-bye.